My sister took my name off the deed to our mother's house. She did it while the funeral flowers were still fresh. You were never really family, Vanessa told me, smiling at her wine. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned the ring on my finger and stayed quiet. In my pocket sat an old brass key, the one Mom pressed into my hand before she died. I never understood why she gave it to me then. They thought a quiet woman couldn't fight back. They thought paperwork forgets. It doesn't. I count things for a living, dates, stamps, signatures. They handed me a seal that should not exist, and never imagined I'd be the one to notice. Not with screaming, with one date that was never supposed to be found. Stay with me, because the moment I laid the truth on her table, the whole room stopped breathing. Welcome to Betrayal Diaries, where quiet people finally tell the truth, and justice speaks softly but never misses. If stories of betrayal, family secrets, and earned justice move you, you're in the right place. Now, let me take you back to where this one began. The brass key was warmer than it should have been. I held it in my palm at the reception, while everyone pretended to grieve. My name is Diane Keller, and I am a records manager. For 11 years, I have organized other people's documents, birth records, deeds, filings. I keep them clean and traceable. I started this work at 22, and I am 33 now. And in all that time, people forgot one thing about me. I notice everything. That afternoon, I noticed my sister Vanessa wearing Mom's pearls. I should explain something about Vanessa first. She is the one everyone loves at first sight. Warm voice, easy laugh, the kind of woman who hugs strangers. I am the other kind, the one who remembers where the paperwork is, the one nobody thanks until something breaks. Our mother, Ruth, had died 11 days earlier. A quiet stroke, no warning. The house she left behind sat on Maple Crossing, a small brick place worth $215,000. Mom always said it would be split between us. Equal, she told me once, pressing my hand across the kitchen table. Always equal, Diane. I believed her. I had no reason not to. At the reception, the air smelled of lilies and reheated casserole. Vanessa found me near the kitchen, holding a glass of red wine and smiling. You don't have to worry about the house, she said. I've handled everything. I turned the ring on my finger, slow, the way I do when something feels wrong. Handled how? The paperwork. It's all settled. She sipped her wine. You were never good with that side of things. That last line stayed with me. I count things for a living. I am the side of things. But I said nothing. I just smiled back and let her believe I hadn't heard the strange weight under her words. 3 days after the funeral, I went to the county recorder's office. Not out of suspicion, out of habit. I wanted to update Mom's file, close out the old records properly. That is what I do. I pulled the deed for the Maple Crossing house. My name was gone. The deed had been transferred. Sole ownership now read Vanessa Keller. The transfer date was stamped just 6 days before Mom died. 6 days. While Ruth was still alive, still talking, still calling me on Sundays. I stood very still in that office. The fluorescent light hummed above me. The paper smelled like every other county document, dry, faintly metallic. I read the date again, then a third time. Something was wrong with it. I couldn't say what yet, but I have looked at 11,000 of these. A real transfer leaves a trail, a signature page, a notary log, a witness line. This one felt thin, too clean in the wrong places. I asked the clerk for a copy. She printed it without a question. Legal, public, mine to request. I folded it into my bag beside the brass key. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and laid the deed flat. I turned the ring on my finger and read every line. The notary stamp sat at the bottom. A small purple seal with a name and a commission date. I didn't recognize the notary, but I wrote the name down anyway. Marcus Pell. Commission expiring next spring. I remember thinking two things that night. First, Vanessa had said settled before I ever knew there was anything to settle. She knew the deed was already changed when she smiled at me with that whine. Second, Mom gave me the brass key for a reason. She pressed it into my hand in the hospital 4 days before the stroke that took her. Keep this safe, she whispered. You'll know when. I didn't know yet, but I would. I didn't cry. I didn't call Vanessa. I made tea, let it go cold, and started a list the way I start every case file. Names, dates, documents. One column for what they claimed. One column for what the records actually said. By midnight, I had only one certainty. The transfer date on that deed was 6 days before my mother's death, and I had a feeling, the cold, careful kind, that the notary's stamp underneath, it was hiding something far worse. Because here is what no one in that family knew about me. I don't forget dates, and that stamp had a date that should not have been possible. I almost convinced myself I was wrong. That is the dangerous part, when you want the lie to be simple. I sat with the deed for 2 more nights. I told myself families make mistakes. Maybe Mom signed early. Maybe I misremembered the conversation. But records don't care what I want. They only tell the truth, and they tell it the same way every time. So I went back to the documents. The transfer needed 3 things to be legal: a signature from Ruth, a witness, and a notary seal. The seal belonged to that name I'd copied down, Marcus Pell. I started there because notaries are easy to verify. Every commission is public record. Dates, numbers, status. The kind of thing I read before breakfast. I pulled the state notary registry on a Tuesday morning. Coffee going cold beside me. The radiator ticking in the quiet. I searched the name. Marcus Pell. His commission had expired. Not next spring, like the stamp claimed. It had expired 14 months earlier. I read it 3 times. The stamp on Mom's deed showed an active commission. The state record showed a dead one. A notary cannot legally stamp anything after his commission ends. It is not a small error. It is the whole foundation. If the notary wasn't valid, the seal wasn't valid. And if the seal wasn't valid, the transfer never happened. Not legally. Not in any way a court would honor. I sat back. The radiator ticked. I turned the ring on my finger, around and around, the way I do when the floor shifts under me. Vanessa hadn't just taken the house. She had used a stamp that couldn't exist. That should have felt like victory. It didn't. Not yet. Because a fake stamp meant someone made it fake. And the only person who benefited was my sister. I called her that evening. I kept my voice level. I am good at level. Vanessa, I saw the deed at the county office. A pause. Just half a second too long. Why were you digging through that? It's my job to keep Mom's records clean. I said. The notary on the transfer, Marcus Pell. Do you know him? Of course not. Her laugh came quick and bright. The lawyer handled all that. I just signed where they told me. There it was. The lawyer. A second name I didn't have yet. Which lawyer? I asked. Why does it matter? Her voice sharpened, then softened, smooth as ever. Diane, you're making this into something. Mom wanted me to have the house. She told me herself, near the end. You weren't there. That landed where she meant it to. I wasn't there at the end. I had been at work, keeping someone else's files in order, while my sister sat at our mother's bedside. The guilt was real. She knew exactly how to use it. She told me equal. I said quietly, people change their minds. And then, gentle as a knife, you always remember things the way you need them, don't you? I didn't answer. I just turned the ring and let the silence sit. After she hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. This was the lowest point, not the missing name, not the stolen house. It was the doubt she planted, the whisper that maybe I was the difficult one, the bitter sister who couldn't let go. For 1 hour, I almost believed her. Then I looked at the registry printout again. Commission expired. 14 months before the stamp. That wasn't a memory. That wasn't a feeling. That was a fact, printed by the state, dated and traceable. Vanessa could rewrite the story of our family. She could not rewrite a government record. I made a new file that night. A real one. I titled it the way I title every case I've ever closed clean. The Maple Crossing Transfer. Inside, 2 pages. The deed. The dead commission. I thought about the brass key in my pocket. Mom's voice in the hospital. Keep this safe. You'll know when. I still didn't know what had opened. But I was beginning to think she'd seen something coming. That she'd handed me the key because she trusted me to be exactly what Vanessa mocked, the one who keeps the records. Before I went to bed, I ran one more search. The lawyer Vanessa mentioned. I didn't have a name yet, but a transfer that size leaves a filing agent on record. I found it on the 2nd page of the property history. The attorney who filed the deed shared a last name with the notary. Pell. 2 people with the same last name. One stamped the deed. One filed it. That is not a coincidence. In 11 years of records, I have learned coincidences are usually just patterns nobody bothered to read. I spent the weekend reading. Saturday morning, I drove to the county archives. The real building, the old one with the heavy doors and the smell of dust and floor wax. I love that smell. It steadies me. The clerk there knows me by face. I requested the full filing history on the Maple Crossing property. Everything, going back 20 years. All public, all legal. I signed the request log and waited. What came back filled a thin folder, and inside it, near the bottom, sat something I did not expect. An old key receipt, stapled to a deposit record from a bank box, dated 9 years ago. In Mom's handwriting, a safe deposit box at First Cumberland, registered to Ruth Keller. The box number matched a stamp on the brass key in my pocket. I had carried that key for 11 days without understanding it. Now, my hands went still on the folder. Mom hadn't given me a house key. She'd given me a key to a box she kept secret for 9 years. I turned the ring on my finger, slow, and felt the weight of it change. The key wasn't a memory anymore. It was a thread, and it led somewhere. But the box would have to wait. First, I needed to be sure about the Pells. I looked up the attorney, Gregory Pell. His firm was small, 2 towns over. His website was clean and warm, full of words like family and trust and legacy. The same words people use when they want you to stop reading the fine print. I read the fine print. Gregory Pell and Marcus Pell. Brothers. Marcus had let his notary commission lapse and apparently kept stamping anyway. Gregory filed the documents his brother sealed. A closed loop, a family business of a different kind. That afternoon, I called an estate attorney I'd worked with for years, a careful woman named Priya Anand. I didn't ask her to fix anything. I only wanted one thing confirmed. Priya, if a notary's commission expired before the stamp date, what is the transfer worth? Nothing, she said. It's void. Not weak, void. Like it never happened. A pause. Why? Just checking my own work. Diane. Her voice slowed. Whose work is it really? My sister's lawyers, I said, and his brother's stamp. She was quiet a moment. Then you don't have a dispute. You have a forged instrument. Those are different things. One you argue, the other you prove. I wrote that down. One you argue, the other you prove. I underlined prove twice. I want to ask you something. If you've stayed with me this far, have you ever known you were right deep in your bones and still been made to feel like the unreasonable one? That was my whole life with Vanessa. She had the warmth. I had the records. People believe warmth. So I had stopped trying to be believed. I just got very, very good at proof. Vanessa called me Sunday. She'd heard from someone at the archives that I'd been pulling files. You're embarrassing yourself, she said. Asking around. People are talking. Let them talk. This is grief, Diane. You're not thinking straight. Her voice was honey again. Let me help you. Come by, we'll sort it out as a family. As a family, the same family that erased my name 6 days before our mother stopped breathing. I'm fine, I said. I'm just keeping the records clean. You know how I am. She laughed, but it came out thin this time. You and your paperwork. Me and my paperwork, I agreed and hung up. I sat with the brass key in one hand and Priya's words in the other. Void. Forged. Proof. I had the dead commission. I had 2 brothers with one scheme. And I had a key to a box my mother hid for 9 years and pressed into my hand 4 days before she died. Monday morning, I drove to First Cumberland Bank. I gave them the key and Mom's box number. The teller checked the registry, then looked up at me with an odd expression. Ma'am, she said, this box has a second name authorized for access. Added recently. I felt the floor tilt. It wasn't mine she'd added, and it wasn't Vanessa's either. Whose name? I asked. My voice stayed level. It always does. But my hand found the ring and started to turn it. The teller hesitated. I can only confirm access for authorized parties. You're listed Diane Keller. The key matches. You can open the box. But there's a co-authorization added 6 days before the registrant passed. 6 days. The same 6 days. The transfer, the death, and now this. Someone had been very busy in the week before my mother died. She led me to a small private room. The box was long and gray, and heavier than I expected. I set it on the table, turned the brass key, and lifted the lid. Inside was not money. It was paper. Of course it was paper. My mother knew me. On top sat a letter in Ruth's handwriting, my name on the front. Under it, a thick folder. And under that, a second deed, the original deed to the Maple Crossing house, the real one listing both daughters. Equal, just as she'd always said. I read the letter first. My hands were not quite steady. She wrote that Vanessa had come to her in the spring, asking her to sign papers. That Vanessa had brought a lawyer to the house. That Mom had signed something she didn't fully read because she was tired and her daughter was crying and she wanted peace. But afterward, something had nagged at her. She'd asked a neighbor's son, a law student, to look. He'd told her the signing felt wrong. So Ruth had done the most Ruth thing imaginable. She'd made her own record. In the folder were photocopies, the papers Vanessa had brought, the lawyer's card, Gregory Pell, a note in Mom's hand. Marcus did the stamp. Greg's brother. I do not trust this. And a dated page, signed and witnessed by the law student, describing exactly what he'd seen and heard that afternoon. My mother had built a case file, quietly, the way I would have. I sat in that little gray room and laughed, just once, because of course she had. She'd handed me the key and said, "You'll know when." She knew I'd read the records. She knew I'd understand what no one else would. The co-authorization added 6 days before her death. That was the law student. She'd given a witness access in case she didn't make it. She had been protecting me before I even knew I needed it. I want to tell you what that did to me. For weeks, I had carried the guilt of not being there at the end. Vanessa had used it like a blade. You weren't there, but my mother had spent her last clear days thinking of me, trusting me with the truth. The guilt didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became something I could carry. I copied everything that afternoon. Legally, my own documents now, my name on the access, the original deed, the letter, the witness statement. I added them to my file, beside the dead commission, and the forged transfer. The case was building itself, the way clean cases do, each page locking the next in place. That evening, Vanessa appeared at my door. She never visits. She stood on my step with her warm coat and her cold eyes. "You went to the bank," she said. "I did. Whatever Mom left you, it doesn't change anything. The house is in my name. It's legal. It's done." I turned the ring on my finger. "Is it?" For the first time, something flickered behind her smile. What is that supposed to mean? It means I keep the records. Vanessa, I always have. You should have remembered that. She stepped closer, voice dropping. You always were jealous. Mom loved me more, and you couldn't stand it. This is sad, Diane. Pathetic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even feel the pull to. Good night, Vanessa. I closed the door gently. Then I stood in the hall and read the witness statement again, slowly this time, because in the bank I'd been too stunned to finish it. The law student hadn't only described the signing. He'd written down what Vanessa said that afternoon, when she thought no one who mattered was listening. Diane won't check. She never reads the paperwork. She doesn't matter enough to look. It was there in his hand, dated, signed, witnessed, not a feeling, a record. She had been right about one thing. I almost didn't look, but I had. And now I held her own words, sealed on the same afternoon as a notary stamp that never legally existed. I had everything now. That is a strange feeling, the moment a case stops growing and starts to close. For weeks I'd been gathering. Now I was just organizing. And organizing is the one thing I have never been afraid of. I laid it all out on my kitchen table, the way I lay out every file before it's finished. Left column, what they claimed. Right column, what the records proved. They claimed Ruth signed the house over to Vanessa, willingly, legally, 6 days before she died. The records said the notary's commission had expired 14 months earlier. The records said Marcus Pell could not legally seal anything. The records said his brother Gregory filed it anyway. The records said my mother had watched the signing, doubted it, and built her own witness statement the very same day. And in that statement, in Vanessa's own words, sat the proof that she'd known exactly what she was doing. 2 documents, one afternoon, telling opposite stories. Only mine was real. I took the whole file to Priya Anand on a Thursday morning. She read it slowly, page by page. The office quiet around us, the smell of old coffee and paper in the air. When she finished, she set her glasses down and looked at me for a long moment. Diane, she said, do you understand what you've assembled here? A void transfer. More than that, you have a forged instrument, an expired notary, a filing attorney who is his brother, and a contemporaneous witness statement from the decedent's own arrangement with the beneficiary's admission inside it. She tapped the folder. This doesn't go to a family mediation. This goes to a courtroom, and it doesn't lose. I know, I said. I just needed someone else to say it first. She almost smiled. How do you want to do this? I had thought about that. For 9 days. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want to ambush Vanessa in public and watch her cry her way out of it. I wanted it clean, documented, traceable. I wanted her to sit across a table and watch the records speak, because the records had always been the one thing she couldn't charm. File the petition, I said, to void the transfer, and request a settlement conference. I want her in a room with her lawyer and a judge's clerk present. No theater, just the file. Priya filed it the next day. The pressure started almost immediately. That is how these things go. When the documents are against you, you go after the person instead. Vanessa called first. Sweet, then sharp. You're really suing your own sister? Over Mom's house. She's barely cold, Diane. When that didn't move me, the calls came from others. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me I was tearing the family apart. An aunt who said Mom would be ashamed. Vanessa had spent her whole life building a network of warmth, and now she turned it on me all at once. Sign a withdrawal, she said, the 3rd time she called. We'll split it. Be reasonable. Think about what people are saying. I sat with the phone and turned the ring on my finger and let her finish. Then I said the only thing that was true. I'm not doing this with people, Vanessa. I'm doing it with paper. And paper doesn't gossip. There was one bad night. I'll be honest with you. A letter came from Gregory Pell's firm. Heavy stationery cold under my fingers, formal language, hinting that I could be liable for defamation, that pursuing this was reckless. For an hour it frightened me. I read it twice and felt my stomach drop. Then I made tea, let it go cold, and read it a third time the way I read everything. Slowly. There was no claim in it, no fact, no citation. It was a stamp without a commission, all seal, no substance. A frightened man's letterhead. I set it in the file with the others. Evidence of pressure, nothing more. Priya laughed when she saw it. They only send these when they're losing, she said. The settlement conference was set for a Monday, 9 days after I'd filed. 9 days, the same span my mother had bought me with a key and a hidden box. The night before, I packed my bag carefully. The void transfer, the expired commission, the 2 pal names, Mom's letter, the witness statement with Vanessa's own words inside, the original deed listing both daughters equal, and the brass key which I no longer needed but would not leave behind. I turned the ring one last time and zipped the bag shut. Tomorrow, Vanessa would finally sit across from the one thing she could never talk her way past, the record. The conference room at Priya's office was small and bright, a long table, a window, a clerk from the court seated quietly at one end with a recorder. Vanessa arrived in cream, warm and composed, Gregory Pell beside her in a gray suit. She smiled at me like we were there to plan a birthday. I sat down and set my bag on the table. I did not raise my voice. I never have. Shall we? Priya said. Vanessa spoke first, of course. She talked about grief, about family, about how I had always struggled to feel included. She was good. If I hadn't held the file in my lap, I might have doubted myself again. When she finished, I opened the bag. I laid the documents down one at a time, slow, the way I close every case. I turned the ring once, then began. This is the transfer deed, I said, stamped 6 days before our mother died. I placed it down. This is the state notary registry. Marcus Pell's commission expired 14 months before that stamp. I placed it beside the first. A notary cannot seal a document after his commission ends. So this transfer is not weak. It is void. It never legally happened. Gregory Pell shifted in his chair. That's a clerical. This is the filing record. I continued, gently laying down the third page. Filed by Gregory Pell, Marcus Pell's brother. I looked at him, not unkindly. Your brother stamped it. You filed it. The room had gone very still. Vanessa's smile was still there, but it had stopped meaning anything. Then I laid down the last pages. This is our mother's letter, in her handwriting. This is the original deed she kept in a safe deposit box. Both daughters, equal. I set down the next sheet, and this is a witness statement, dated the same afternoon as the transfer. Ruth watched the signing. She doubted it. She had a law student record, what he saw, and what you said, Vanessa, when you thought no one who mattered was listening. I let that sit 1 second. Then I read her own words aloud, level and quiet. Diane won't check. She never reads the paperwork. She doesn't matter enough to look. I placed the brass key on top of the papers. It was the peak of everything, the original deed, the dead commission, and her own admission laid bare on that table, the fake exposed beside the true. You told me I was never really family. I said, quietly. You told me I remembered things the way I needed them. I looked at her. It wasn't a memory, Vanessa. It was a record, and the record doesn't forget. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Gregory Pell was already leaning toward his client, whispering. The court clerk wrote steadily. Priya simply folded her hands. They settled within the hour. There was no point fighting paper that proved itself. The transfer was voided in full. The house returned to the estate and was split, exactly as Mom had always said, equal. But Vanessa's own words, written and witnessed, had taken her innocence off the table. She couldn't pretend she was just a daughter who signed where she was told. She covered every dollar of the legal costs, and the documented admission was attached to the filing, a permanent record that she had planned it. Gregory Pell faced a referral to the state bar for filing his brother's invalid seal. Marcus Pell's lapsed practice was reported to the licensing board, and the family that had whispered I was tearing them apart read the truth in Ruth's own handwriting. The warmth Vanessa spent her whole life building turned cold in a single afternoon. The closed loop finally opened. Vanessa didn't scream. People like her never do at the end. She gathered her coat, her composure cracking only at the edges, and left without looking at me. I stayed a moment after they'd gone. The room was silent. Through the window, afternoon light fell across the table and warmed the papers, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders come down. I picked up the brass key and held it, not as a weapon now, just a thing my mother had touched. I breathed out, slow and full. I didn't keep the whole house. I sold my half and used part of it to start something small, a free service that helps elderly people organize their estate records properly so no one's signature can ever be stolen while they sleep. I named it after Ruth, the one good thing built from all that paper. I spent my whole life keeping other people's records clean, unthanked, in the quiet, and I learned that patience is not weakness. The truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be written down and kept and laid on the table when the time is right. If you've been carrying something heavy, and quietly put it down the right way, not with noise, with truth. I turned the ring on my finger one last time. Then I slipped the brass key into my pocket, and I went home. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed quiet and gathered proof, or confronted her on day one? If you believe quiet people deserve justice too, give this video a like and share it with someone who needs it tonight. Subscribe to Betrayal Diaries for a new story of betrayal and quiet justice every day, and tap the screen now to watch another one right here. I'll see you in the next story.